Okay, this is the follow-up video to the last one. I'm sure I'm gonna mess around and play with the graphs a little bit on this file named comprehensive, what was it named? Comprehensive Stock Analysis Monthly. Now, there's another file called daily or weekly where you can get the stocks in a much more fine kind of way. Okay, but what I'm going to do this time is talk about technical issues, and I think I'll just start with the first one. I'll talk about some macros. This is just an illustration. So I right click and this is where if you want to clear out a bunch of sheets, I've used this so much, so I think it's probably okay. I start with the end. You start with the end and work backwards. If you don't start with the end and work backwards, you can't, this sheet num keeps changing all the time. If you start with the end, you can delete sheet number 100, 99, 98, and those don't change. If you started with sheet 1, deleted with sheet 1, then sheet 1 becomes sheet 2 and all this stuff. Okay, and then you can, here's what I did at the end of this one. I said, okay, well, I want to delete, I want to reset a certain variable. These are these exchange rate codes. I want to delete, I want to reset them to 0. When you do that, you need to use the range, and you don't need to. I'm sure you can do this another way. I use the cells function. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. Okay, and then when we do this, I'm also going to show you just a little bit of, this is kind of basic. What I do here is simply go, and this is where we get and put all the master lists together. And this was a pain. It's very manual, very kind of basic. And you get, what happens is when you collect data finally, some of the data might be in this one. It's in column F. Okay? These are all in column F, the adjusted close. But then when we look finally at the stuff we get from the Fred database, that's in column B, not in column F. So you really need to define which column you're getting the data from to put all of this stuff together. I think this is okay. And then you can see where it's from. That's not quite necessary. And then here's the way it works. You just you make a little counter. Just a minute. This counter keeps incrementing. So this counter came from the last one. So this, I counted eight kind of stocks here, and I counted that from the from each file. I showed you in the last video kind of how you put all these files and you use a little COUNTIF. So you count all of this stuff together, and then you keep incrementing the counter. You keep there it goes to 9, there it goes to 20, and then after you increment the counter, you have to try to put everything together in a master list. So you get the data first, and then you just let's go over here. Let's go over one more. Oops, there's a dog here helping me with my video, helping a lot, but I don't need to be licked that much. Okay, get away. Okay. Ah, shoot, I dropped my computer. Okay, sorry. Very unprofessional. Very, 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 very unprofessional. But you reorder the data. Okay? Here's a good example of where you reorder the data, and you just use the match index, a whole bunch. You can follow this, and then finally you just put them all together in one long list. I hope I've not made any mistakes when I do that. And then that list then is, you use the developer tab, of course, and make a little combo box. You can look at other videos on this combo box. So that video, that's a list of all, that list is used here, and that list is used here. Okay, that's how it kind of works. Enough of the kind of just pure raw Excel. I tried to come up with a more efficient way to do this, and I didn't do this. And then each one of these, the way you do this is you've got to be really careful. You've got to always set in. I started to read about 3 pages of one single uh, book on VBA. And I couldn't get past the second chapter. And I bought some other books on it. This was years ago before you got all this stuff on the internet. And the one thing it said, there's a sheet, there's a workbook, and there's a cell. That was really helpful. About nothing else. And the sheet, you start with this sheet, but then later on you need another sheet. You need to keep going back to this Yahoo sheet. Okay? So then you need to rename that sheet. I kind of named them the same, which is really, really bad form, but then you go back and forth and back and forth. Okay, and let's just review a couple of other things. So let's see how we get the Fred data. And I think it might be good to go to the commodity prices. There's always a read one and a read all. Okay, let me see if I have some kind of guidelines to go through how we're going to do this. Okay, so the first thing you do is you go and you go to this Fred database. Okay, you can type in Fred data or something. Okay, and then you say, okay, I want to get some categories, and and this is just, I think, still, there are 4 or 5 good places to go to get this, but this is certainly one of them, and you get this. I hope Trump doesn't cut the spending for this one. Oh, please don't. And you get if I want countries, and let's say I want to get the inflation rate for who should we get it for? Just a minute. India. Okay, and then we have break-even inflation rate. Ooh, trimmed. Oh no, it's not so good. Oh well. Sticky consumer price index. Break even. I don't even know what the break even price. I just want an inflation rate. Oh well. Uh, uh, okay. How about? Oh, this is really embarrassing. Okay, let's see if they consumer price index. Good. And then what you would do is you get this. Now, in the old days, the uh, Fred would put this in a text file. And that text file you could really read in easily. And now you can only download to Excel. You can't download it doesn't let you download to this anymore. So there's an old way. That's how I do it. I remember this. I was lucky I did this before. So you copy this if we want this one, and you put it in the spreadsheet. This time I'm putting it in my exchange rate spreadsheet, okay, and I'm putting it over here. Now I'm going to copy edit space special as a T, right? Format, okay, and then this one. If I copy these 3 down, I did this for other ones. I always have to press Shift F9 to redo the calculation in this. This is, I'll call this Mex Bonds, and this is Mex CPI, Mex CPI. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that was embarrassing. Mex CPI 1 and Mex exchange rates and Mex. And this is Indonesia. I'll call it Indio interest rates and INDO interest 1 or something, blah blah blah, and then so you need a sheet name. That's the point. And then finally, we just did this India CPI. Okay, so I'm going to keep collecting this stuff because I want to demonstrate to my students that really inflation rates, the starting point for any cost of capital analysis is inflation, 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 inflation. If you don't get, if you are borrowing money and the inflation rate is, or lending money and the inflation rate is 10% and you make 5%, you've lost your ability to buy your Maseratis at the end if you're buying them from a different country in Italy, let's say. Okay, enough. So then once you have this, we can kind of get all our new data. Just this is a little bit of repetition of kind of what I was doing before, but we can get all of our data, Control R, Shift F9, just get this sheet, and we get all of our put all of our data together. I really do want to do a little analysis of the exchange and interest rates. Those are the kind of things you get. So that's how you get the data from Fred. Okay? And this video might be long, and I don't care. I'm sorry. I know these videos. A lot of times I feel like I could make these videos in 5 minutes, and I ramble on for 20 minutes, and I'm really sorry about that. Each one time you read one data. Now this is the easy one, because you just take this up here. This is this code number. Okay, you use the index function, index function, index function so much. I always say you only need index lookup and kind of sum if. That's all you really need. Even index match is overdone. Lookup is much better than index match if it's a time series. Okay? And it doesn't make the sheet heavy or some, old wives' tale that I've heard. And then you put this together. Here's the kind of base URL, and you just put that together, and you put a .txt at the end, and then you read one data thing in. It's not so hard. It really, really, really is not so hard. You can put some application display alerts false. I put a base book and a base sheet to show our starting point, something I talked about. You better put a range name on this URL. This is called currency URL. Okay, and then um, then you have to make a text to columns. That's maybe the most painful part. Okay, because when you get it straight into the text file, it doesn't do it. And then it says, okay, then copy this sheet you've downloaded. I did a text to copy first. Then I downloaded the sheets, and then I don't need this minimum stuff. Sorry, I'm going to talk about that later. I don't need all of that. Okay, this stuff. Okay, and we skipped it all around, and then we're finished. And then we've read one in. This is reading one in. Control S to save, sorry. And then we read them all in, and when we read them all in, essentially all you do is you change this counter. I put this in a different color. You change this counter in the macro with a loop. Change it to 2, change it to 3, and each time I change it, I better press Shift F9 to get the new code number in. I get the new code number in. It changes the currency URL. Not very difficult. It really should take about 5 minutes, and it shouldn't take a long time to kind of understand how this works. So you read in one, you did the hard work here, and then when you read them all in, here's how it works. That's a named range. It's called exchange counter, okay? So you get all, again, define the base sheets and all this stuff. And there's a little problem. The biggest problem for me is getting the calculation to make sure it goes really quickly. And then you get that sheet you just made. So you first go around and around till this total. You go around to the 14, which is just a COUNTIF here. And you go around and around. And each time you get the data and you download it. And then somewhere I have to, where did I name the sheet? I guess I named the sheet up here. I named this sheet here. So each time you made a sheet, you got it, Okay, you named the sheet and you went around and around and around and just put them all together. That's the Phred database. Now there's one little thing about the Phred. Okay, here's how you get the data, and here's how we just put all our extra formulas in, and here's our big list of stuff. And here I put the macro in, so if you want to copy this, I'm going to put all of this stuff on the website. And then you can use this thing called Shift Control F. Now, I did this. Again, this is technical. A technical video. Okay, I'm allowed to make a technical video. I'm allowed to do whatever I want, really. Not everything I want, obviously. People are getting in trouble. I am gonna go to my macros list. Let's do it here. Okay, I don't know where to. And then I'm gonna go to auto open. And in auto open, I put on key, and this is I keep forgetting kind of how to do this. You can make this with a control, an alternate, a function. You can shift control alt enter and all this, and then this is the name of the file you're calling. So whenever you press auto open, it gets this, and you should really set it off when you do. You should do an auto close. I didn't bother. And then this says, okay, here's what I want to do. I created this control F, and there's a problem here because when you go to some of these sheets, let's go to this oil price sheet. It doesn't. When I did the text to columns, you do the text to columns with a space, and it puts all this stuff at the top in the spaces. So you want to make sure and stop here. You want to stop here, and up here you just want to recombine all of this. So it says title, crude oil prices, and it doesn't put them in these horrible spaces. So you press Shift Control F. And it calls that thing called format description. Okay, and then. This is why I should have closed it. It opened another file, and that was kind of embarrassing. And then it puts it together, and here's how it puts it together. I'm not going to say why. What happened just now is that I had another Shift Control F in that other file when I closed it. I think I better do this. I wasn't going to do this, but you should also put an auto close so it doesn't do that kind of stuff. And then you put application on key, and you just put nothing there. All right. I hope. Okay, and then here's what it does. It says go to manual calculation, find the start date, do a match, a minimum function on column A, find the lowest date, then do a match to get that row number on the whole column, and then go around for all the rows and for about 15 columns, and then go start with column 2, not with column 1, 2, 2, 2, and then go and say, okay, let's in column 1, let's just keep going around all the columns and put all those column cells, column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, keep adding them with the and sign, and then you'd finished. Okay, so that's the control F loop, and there's a little, I copied the macro here. And let's talk about I've talked about this in a lot of other videos, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. This video for reading Yahoo is a little bit more complicated because we have to initialize a crumb and a cookie, whatever in the heck that does. I had to copy this, and after I made about a zillion mistakes, I kind of am starting to understand it a tiny bit, not completely. And then you go around and around just like we did with the other one, and then each time you go around, you use this thing called web request instead of workbooks.open to get the data, and then you have to clean up the data. And I did some of this myself. Some of this I took from a really good person who who put them in. I forgot the name of it now. Look at it. Shoot, I hope I gave the person credit for this. The So you go to the and now we're really stuck. We can't read Google anymore. Google, I mean, they stopped it. So if you go to this one called read the indices, the first thing, it's just the same thing. You do kind of a read all. It goes around, and this is an index function, okay, and it goes around and around and around and around. Okay, but before it does this, it has something called initialize cookie. What a silly thing. But this initialize cookie, and what I tried to do is put all of these things in. If you go to the Project Explorer and want to find these, I put Auto Open, Google Read, Fred Read, and Web Request. So I'll go here. That's where I just was. And there's something called initialize cookie, and what it does is it goes around, and you have to use something called web request. Here's what you need to do to get this web request. You have to put an add-in in here, tools and reference, and you have to have this thing called HTTP services. You have to have that one clicked. God knows why. Okay, that's really important. I should say that about 5 times. Okay, this has to be clicked. This has to be clicked. I think I'm going to have to put that as like a warning in the perhaps in the auto open of the whole file. I forgot to do that. Okay, I'm going to just a minute. I'm going to clip this so I don't forget to do that. Okay, I'm going to put perhaps this all the way at the very top of the file that we really need to get this one in here, okay? All right, that'll make me remember it. Sorry, I'm kind of doing this, that's not very professional what I'm doing, okay? But that's absolutely necessary. Okay, this is not so easy. Then once you get the web request, once you define it, okay, and you define this web request URL, I guess that's not that necessary. Then you set it, and you go and get the file. In this file, I got the Google. I went to finance.yahoo.com, and then it goes around and around, and it finds one that has a length of 11. And when it finds a length of 11, I put it into an output, both the crumb and the cookie into an output. And it turns out you really only have to do this once. Now, when I was in Ostrava, I had to wait a longer time. I put this response wait. You can wait 10 seconds, 5 seconds. You can wait different amounts of time on all of this. Okay, I put 3 seconds now if you've got a good fast internet. And then this was the read all, which is just the same. And then you go down and read the thing, and you use this web request again. You need to define the dimension, the variable, and then I need an output variable, which I'll come back to. Okay, I don't know how I'm describing this. I don't know if I'm making it worse, better, or maybe it's either better to go through it really, really, really slowly, or just say, go and copy the file and just try to figure it out yourself. I don't know. And then we have the name. This is a range name. This is our URL that you put together just like we did with the Fred. And then you say you need this thing called set. I don't know why. Don't ask me why, please, please. And then you go and get that URL. You get that cookie from and that cookie came from the range name we just did before. Okay, and then you wait for the response just like it is, and it gives you something called the text. But this text is some really long, horrible string. It's just some really, really long string. So then you can take this one, and I just thought of something, by the way. So, sometimes, when you have this, you put it into a row. You put it into a bunch of different rows, and you use the split function. I think there's even an Excel split function, and it splits when it has this thing called a line feed. And somehow it knows that the total upper bound of the out row, it knows how many rows it has. How does it know that? Just a minute. Because this out row is just a variable. Well, I forgot how it knows that. Excuse me. Row max. No, it just defines this thing called row max. It's the total amount in the array. So I'm just babbling on. That was really, really bad. It wasn't supposed to be clear. Then here's what you have to do. You have to put you don't have to do anything, but you put this output, which is just in one singular array, into a two-dimensional array. And the reason I put this into a two-dimensional array with 20,000, 20,000, some enormous kind of array, is that it goes really fast. You can make it go really fast. In the VBA, you assign it to column 1. And then once you have assigned it to column 1, you make a range name called A:(A to A100 or 1,000 or 10,000. And then you just make this range name with this one equal to that matrix. You don't put any row and column. That's why you need a two-dimensional array. And then it does it quickly. Huh. I made it through that one. Ooh. Okay. That's kind of the web request. Now, I think, okay, that was a little bit on and I put these kind of things here where you initialize, you get it, and I tried to put a lot of comments in here, the cookie and the crumb. And then finally, let's end this, and let's talk about how to make it a much faster kind of a process. And to make it a much faster process, here's what you do. You go and you, if you recalculate, now in this sheet, I'm just going to show you a little bit of this summary sheet. Okay, first of all, this was a really pain. You make a macro that goes, and for that base thing, oops, I didn't want that. This macro, you make this macro, and on this macro, you copy I put it into a separate sheet, but basically you copy what's in column A, so you get a starting date list. And you say, well, this is the starting point. A good starting point, I think, really will be, did I put S&P 500? I think the S&P 500 is kind of a good starting point list, because that's the one that kind of goes furthest back in time. So I'm going to redo that. When I redo that, it goes through a macro, and all it does is it copies and pastes from that S&P file all the dates. Okay, that's all it does. But then you say, okay, I want to put a start date and an end date. And I used to do this by months, and it used to take people forever to find the right month. So I just put it by year. End year. Why I end it with 2015 now, and I suppose I have to embarrassingly calculate it. Okay. I should have put that in a macro that I'm just going to explain now. So it starts at 1975, kind of goes to today. We have the start and the end, and we put this date in that just has a start and the end, and this time it goes by month. And it doesn't, I go to the end of the month. There must be an end of the month function here. We go to an end of the month, and then here is the big trick. You get the raw data. No. You get the raw data from an indirect function. I've gone through this so many times, I don't want to go through it again and again and again. What I do want to say about the indirect, I do want to say something about the indirect. This I found through hitting my head against the wall, against the wall, against the wall. this thing slows you down. It slows you down. So is there a way to make this recalculation work so we don't, you know, when we change the dates around, if I change the start date around, I don't really need to re-get this data. So what I'm doing is only recalculating this, and this, of course, is a lookup function. And that does not slow you down. Don't listen to some, you know, what you call these myths, you know, these urban legends that this will slow you down. What a lot of crap. This is the one that slows you down. So you have to make a ranged name, and when you make a ranged name, you recalculate when you do these dates. I'll show you it on the date itself. You attach this to a macro, and when you recalculate, you only recalculate some specific named ranges in that sheet. You don't compute the whole sheet, and the order matters. The order matters. The order matters here. That's a pain. But I think it's really worthwhile. So you just name some big ranges that do not include the indirect, that do not include the indirect. 3 times do not include the indirect. And then you recalculate this. Now, hopefully you have to recalculate part 1, part 2, part 3. So up here, if I look at graph part 1 or something, okay, there are too many range names in here. I don't like this. But this is part 1. Notice it does not include the indirect, okay? And then you, then, what is this one? This is the indirect, this is the lookup, and then you can make your exchange rate adjustment, and you can, that's not so complicated, but you read in your exchange rates all the way at the bottom here, okay? The rest of this is not that difficult, but you read in all the other stocks over here. It's all indirect. This is lookup, and this is, but this is what you don't want to read. I'm sorry, this is the indirect. This is the indirect, and this is the lookup. So you use lookup and indirect to rearrange all of the dates, and you make sure that you do not recalculate any of this, because after you read them in, let's read one in. Let's read G in or something. Okay. So what this is going to do, and that's why this was a tiny bit slower, because on this one I put another macro here, and I think being really careful with this one, I had to go and recalculate this whole summary sheet, because this time I needed to go and get the indirect, but then I went to this thing called summary calc, and then I didn't have to do it after that. So when you do any of these things around here, you don't have to redo it. Okay? Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay, here's the problem. I didn't have GE there. I didn't read that in yet. Okay, let's instead get Henry Hub natural gas prices or something. Okay. All right, and then, of course, now the dates, we have this wonderful thing where we start with the very first date, and then we can compare the stock price to the index to the Henry Hub, and that's the way this works. This really works so quickly, and that all these kind of recalculate buttons have this, and then in the I just should say one more thing, and I think I can stop now. I think that video is not as long as I'm happy it's not. When you do something like the beta, which is the percent change in the stock versus the percent change in the index, okay, I don't know why I started the beta on the wrong one here, but okay. Or computing the standard deviation of the percent change, and then volatility, we adjust it to the periods in the year. Okay, all of these things, and the IRR is somewhere else over here. That's using index. But all these things, if you have faults in here, it doesn't affect the calculation. I just know that from trial and error again. Okay, so that's how it kind of does a little transpose command to get all of these things out. That's how it all works. Not so well, I don't know. I hope it's got a lot in there. I hope one of the real things you see is the recalculate stuff that that has taken me longer to kind of get right than just about any of this other stuff in the web request. That came from somebody else. I just stole that, but whatever. Okay, so that's how you can put all of this stuff together. I think I'm gonna now I'm gonna read in exchange rate. So let's put in this. What you do here is when you put in this, it kind of recalculates the list for you, and includes the new exchange rates we had, and we put in all of those things with Mexico and Indonesia, and we have them in our list now, and all we have to do is go through and read all those exchange rates and put them in, and then we can start to not only get a graph of all the stock prices, we can kind of see how the interest rates and the up. I had one that's not working. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna stop the video. I'm gonna stop the video. I've gone on long enough. I'm gonna fix this, and one day I'll show you another one. 36 minutes is enough torture for you today if you've really made it through all this, and my dog is really